During his time running 20th Century Fox in the mid to late 70s, Alan Ladd Jr. approved production on a number of films that would become highly regarded, including Breaking Away, Julia, Norma Ray, and Alien. However, he would become most celebrated for greenlighting George Lucas's space adventure Star Wars, and even though other higher-ups at Fox lacked confidence in the movie, he stood by it and Lucas's vision. His instincts would prove correct, and yet, because of conflicts with CEO Dennis Stanfill, he decided to leave his position as president of Fox and start his own production company. Bringing along two other Fox executives, Jay Cantor and Gareth Wigan, they immediately founded the Ladd Company. A deal was then signed with Warner Brothers to help finance and release their movies. Ladd was given an impressive amount of power by WB, even being allowed to choose the release dates for his films. Thanks to goodwill from his time at Fox, Ladd was able to quickly scoop up some notable productions. The first movie produced by the Ladd Company was Divine Madness, a concert film with Bette Midler. It pulled in $5 million, a solid sum for concert film. While he was at Fox, Ladd personally championed a movie about British runners titled Chariots of Fire. However, after he left, Fox decided to only retain foreign rights to the movie, thinking the story would not appeal to American viewers. Ladd then acquired the North American rights, and it became a crowd pleaser and a sleeper hit, further helped by winning the Oscar for Best Picture. Ladd also produced Lawrence Kasdan's directorial debut Body Heat, an erotic thriller starring William Hurt and Kathleen Turner, which received solid reviews from critics and did decent business at the box office. Unfortunately, the Ladd Company also released a series of flops that would hurt them. One was Outland, a science fiction movie originally developed at Universal that was later brought to Ladd. The film pulled in underwhelming numbers, as did Michael Crichton's sci-fi film Looker. A particularly infamous production was Ridley Scott's Blade Runner. It was a natural project for Ladd to take on, having worked with Scott before on Alien. Harrison Ford was also cast because of his association with Star Wars, and Ladd even decided to release it on the 25th, the same date that those movies opened on. However, after negative test screenings, Scott was forced to add a narration, which neither he nor Ford were enthusiastic about. A new happy ending was also added to the movie. When Blade Runner was released, the critics were mixed on it, admiring the visuals, but finding the pacing dull and the characters uninteresting. The box office was also a disappointment, as it struggled to compete against other summer movies like E.T., Star Trek II, and Poltergeist. The movie would eventually find a larger audience on home video, with a growing cult following leading to versions closer to Ridley Scott's vision being released, until Scott finally produced his own final cut, which is now the definitive version of Blade Runner. One wonders how the movie would have fared back in 1982 had the film not been tinkered with. Ladd would produce some more underperforming titles, like the romantic movies Love Child and 5 Days, One Summer, although Ron Howard's comedy Night Shift found an audience. A movie the Ladd Company had a lot of confidence in was the astronaut drama The Right Stuff. The movie had originally been set up at United Artists, but they eventually decided to drop out and Ladd would acquire the project. It would end up costing $27 million, so a lot was riding on this, but even though it got fantastic reviews, not many people showed up. The Right Stuff would receive 8 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, but that was still not enough to help the movie turn a profit. Ladd's understandable confidence in The Right Stuff would actually hurt a different film they produced. That was the animated film Twice Upon a Time, a production of Lucasfilm. Directed by John Cordy and Charles Swenson, George Lucas had helped bring the project to Alan Ladd Jr.'s attention, and it was among the first films announced on Ladd's slate. However, due to their series of financial disappointments, Ladd had to choose between putting their support behind either The Right Stuff or Twice Upon a Time. The former was a lot more expensive and was seen as more commercially viable, so they put their marketing strength behind The Right Stuff. Twice Upon a Time was given a minuscule release and did little business. Most people did not get to see the movie until it aired on HBO in a version with more profanity, much to John Cordy's displeasure. The box office performance of both of these movies would seriously affect the Ladd Company's bottom line, as did Bob Fosse's Star 80, a biopic of Playboy playmate Dorothy Stratton. That film is seen as a possible Oscar contender, but it achieved neither nominations nor box office, although it has since gotten reappraised. It did not help that Ladd turned down projects that would become successful for other studios. Despite his success with Body Heat, he said no to Kasdan's script The Big Chill, which was eventually bought by Columbia Pictures. Similarly, he decided not to make Splash. Ron Howard would end up making that movie for Disney instead. Interesting enough, one of their few successes came from a comedy idea that originated on the set of The Right Stuff. Paul Maslansky, who was a production executive on the film, noticed a couple of San Francisco Police Department recruits who did not look like typical cops. He was then told that the mayor had ordered them to recruit a wide spectrum of police officers. Maslansky saw the comedic possibilities of this and came up with Police Academy. He took the idea to Ladd, who greenlit the film, and while critics were dismissive of its wacky hijinks, it was a big success with moviegoers, becoming one of the highest-grossing films of 1984. However, that was not enough to save the Ladd Company, and a month after the release of Police Academy, Warner Brothers announced they would end their deal with them. WB retained the rights to the films they produced together and released a few more movies under the Ladd name, but the partnership was otherwise finished. One of those films was Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in America. An almost 4-hour cut of this gangster epic premiered at the Cannes Film Festival to critical acclaim, but the Ladd company decided to remove several scenes without Leone's involvement. When American critics saw this 2-hour and 19-minute version, they deemed it a butchering of the movie, and it flopped in North America. Americans would not get to see Once Upon a Time in America the proper way until its home video release. Police Academy 2 continued the box office success of its predecessor, but it will be the last movie in the franchise produced by Ladd, as Warner Brothers will make the remaining 5 films themselves. The last film released by Warner as part of the deal was the prison comedy Doing Time, a film I had trouble finding any box office information on, which suggests the studio dumped it in as few theaters as possible. Alan Ladd Jr. put his company aside for a while after becoming the new head of MGM, where he helped greenlight and distribute films like Moonstruck, Spaceballs, Overboard, A Fish Called Wanda, Willow, and Thelma and Louise. Curiously, he also received an executive producer credit on the body swap comedy Vice Versa, which was released by Columbia. In 1993, after he was ousted from MGM, he decided to revive his company and signed a new deal with Paramount. However, while Ladd was allowed to make any film he wanted when he was partnered with Warner Brothers, he required approval from Paramount before he could go forward on any project. He produced the Brady Bunch movie, a satirical take on the television show, which did quite well at the box office. Next came Braveheart, a project Ladd had wanted to make at MGM, but when he left, he took the movie with him. He would hire Mel Gibson to direct, who eventually also decided to star as William Wallace. Paramount curiously only financed a third of the movie, while 20th Century Fox put up the rest of the money and took international rights. Both studios ended up benefiting, as the film proved to be a sleeper hit during the summer of 1995. Alan Ladd Jr. would also take home the Oscar for Best Picture. You would think after the success of Braveheart, he would be riding high and put out several more hits. Did not quite work out that way. Ladd's next project was the superhero movie The Phantom, which got mixed reviews and flopped at the box office. This was followed by a Very Brady sequel, which also pulled in disappointing numbers and would be his last film for Paramount. The Ladd company would disappear again for several years, although Ladd was an executive producer on The Man in the Iron Mask, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, which did very well, partly helped by opening a few months after Titanic. His company would eventually return with the drama Unfinished Life, starring Robert Redford and Jennifer Lopez. Even though it was filmed in 2003, Miramax kept it on the shelf for 2 years, and when it finally did come out, there was little fanfare and it flopped. Ladd next produced Ben Affleck's feature directing debut Gone Baby Gone, which received excellent reviews but did not exactly light up the box office. That would be the Ladd company's final film and the last film Alan Ladd Jr. would produce before his death in 2022. While his company may not have reached the heights he hoped, it still produced a decent number of movies that remain highly regarded and celebrated today. See you next time.